Kind of like last week, we were talking with Shashi about how him and I would both code using AI. Damon is not someone who codes first. For those who don't know, Damon's a PhD candidate at Duke. He's studying biomedical engineering, so he's mostly in like wet lab work and doing running experiments. But things have recently changed that have made it very, very possible to be a technical person without knowing how to code, at least as far as software. So, Damon, we'd love to just hear about how the journey has been for you so far with AI, where you were 2 years ago versus where you are now.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. I mean, first off, I think you said it well in the sense that technical capabilities for people who might have been skilled in a particular area, the rate at which those people can upskill in other areas now, primarily software, is greater than ever before.
Mhm.
Said quite simply, there are things that I can now build very fast that would have been impossible for me to build 2 years ago. And we've seen that come into practice internally by the use of new internal tools that have helped us kind of with go to market, with some distribution, with some content ideas. And we've also seen it kind of accelerate things that I think are not directly tethered to this business, but that enable kind of real world innovations. And what I mean
Yeah.
by that is in my PhD studies, I'm kind of duoing with these systems almost on a daily basis in the sense that I'm asking them, what can I try? Right? What experiments can
Mhm.
I run in the real world that would give me new data, that would give me new avenues to explore, and not necessarily relying on AI to provide the answers for those, but instead just as a brainstorming partner to say, what is possible? What am I not thinking
Mhm.
about? Right? What surface area hasn't been covered and that I wouldn't have otherwise thought about? And in that way, these things have become a really powerful tool. And in many ways, what I'm most excited for is the opportunity of these things to lead to new possibilities, some of which
Mhm.
I think are easy to anticipate, and some of which we have, several years, maybe even decades before we realize.
Where do you think there's a lot of just like hype in general in this space? And I think, especially with the O1 models, the O3 models, there's all this talk about like they do scientific reasoning better than like most PhDs can. Have you found that like that's actually true? Like, have you ever tried using an O1 or an O3 model for any science?
Yeah, short answer, yes, I've tried it. Short answer, no, I don't think it's currently true. And
Okay.
what they are very good at is parsing data.
Hmm.
So again, regularly I am uploading PDFs, scientific manuscripts into these systems. I am interacting with it in a way that is more conversational, allowing me to kind of get to the bottom of things
Hmm.
without having to worry about getting caught up in technical jargon or some nuance that otherwise I would have been wading through for minutes to hours at a time. Right. So
Yeah.
now I can read papers across domains in a way that wasn't previously possible, right? So I'm basically more fluent now in various domains of science, whereas otherwise I was kind of specialized before. So I feel much better about kind of being again across domains. I feel much better about pulling in
Hmm.
insights that were previously kind of under discovered into my own work. And so in that way, I wouldn't classify that as reasoning. I would classify that as a kind of a tool or an expanding toolbox that allows me to, again, kind of converse with these systems, brainstorm as more of a collaboration partner and
Hmm.
reach insights that wouldn't have otherwise been possible. But in my limited experience, and in fact, I've written about this for Scholar Eye and elsewhere, um, AI right now doesn't plan very well. It's not very good at helping people understand the questions they should be asking. Instead, it's much better at the actual execution of things once the human, me or whomever in this case,
Do
is
you look at that
telling.
as do you look at that
Hmm?
as different from like when I look at like what the O models are, like with reasoning being like I'm going to be thoughtful about my steps first before telling a response. Do you look at the planning and the reasoning as two separate things?
I do because, and maybe it's an important, perhaps semantic
Hmm.
discussion. And when I say planning, what I mean is if you ask open-ended questions to the AI, such as like, what important discoveries or what important insights should I be looking for in my scientific work? Right, where is kind of the greenfield opportunity? What kind of equations, what experiments haven't been done? It's very bad at generating those ideas. If you instead say,
Hmm.
I want to achieve X, how do I achieve X? That type of planning is actually very good at, especially with the reasoning
Hmm.
models, where it does take multi steps to say, start here, then go here, and then go, to step three and so on. I
Hmm.
do find it to be quite good at helping with that, especially if you can feed in real world data back into the system, right? It helps plan an
Mhm.
experiment. I execute that experiment. I return the data back to it, ask it then what to do next, right? Or say, no, that didn't work. Help me find, alternatives to let me use a tangible example. I'm working on a biosensor right now for a drug in which people, when they're on this drug, they have to be monitored throughout the course of their lifetime. This drug is specific for people that receive new organs. So people are very, very sick. They have to go on this drug, and this drug helps them live happy and healthy lives. This drug is difficult to detect in blood because it goes inside of red blood cells and it binds to a protein inside the red blood cells. And so what I needed was a precise buffer that would help me detect this drug in blood, effectively debinding it from its protein, but not debinding it so strongly that it broke my biosensor. And so trying to thread that needle, if you will, what I've been able to do is I've been able to generate a list of testable buffers with AI that I wouldn't have otherwise thought about. And now I can go actually apply that in the real world, bring it back results and iterate from there. And actually that's the process I'm undergoing right now. So we've seen some success in those. And I wouldn't necessarily call them new buffers, but they're again buffers kind of across domains in science that I just simply wouldn't have found as easily and maybe never would have found without
The
kind of that
discovery
inspiration.
step. Yeah.
Correct.
Discovery. I see. What
Correct,
is
yeah.
like, we were talking when me and Josh were talking about just like what's like to be building today. We're talking a lot about like what our tools and what our workflow was. And obviously, again, you've been building, you've been coding, but really curious if you have like a kind of defined workflow that like if another PhD or another researcher is listening to this podcast that may not be like super comfortable with AI, like how would you recommend that they get started using these tools and ways in which they can integrate it, which makes it very effective for getting better research done?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think it's a great question. So I would break it into two phases. If they're in the reading phase and kind of in the self-discovery phase, then I really do just like the very simple workflow of upload the PDF of whatever you're interacting with and then interact with that PDF as if it were a person. Ask it questions, you can dive into certain aspects, you can go find specific text. The thing that I don't like about the public user interfaces that are available, whether that's ChatGPT or Claude via Anthropic or otherwise, is that you can't see exactly where the answers are coming from. Like that viewer isn't perfect yet. And so I would like to see improvements on the viewer side, which I know we're working on and I think others are as well. But as far as getting the information out of a single or even multiple PDFs, I find it very good. So I basically am now reading papers still in the traditional sense that I'm reading them top to bottom. But then after I read them top to bottom, rather than trying to go back and reread specific questions myself, I usually find that interacting with these AI systems to pull those insights out is faster. And in fact, I can do it more thoughtfully than before. The other thing that I'm doing is once I get data, depending on the kind of data and my familiarity with looking at those particular data sets, I'm going to upload that data set to an AI and just ask it to tell me about it. Ask it to tell me about the different ways I could be analyzing it, asking about the standard ways that other people across the literature are analyzing these particular data sets. And then just going through this multi-layer analysis to where maybe I was doing one or two types of analysis on a data set. Now I'm doing 5 or 6 because the AI can tell me about these new ones and usually can perform them. Right. It can write the code to perform the data set or otherwise. And so in that way, I've kind of become more of a data scientist, just given that like I can work with these systems to say, do data discovery around this real world data. Tell me how other people would look at this data. Tell me how people might critique this data, right? What follow-on experiments might I do in order to make this data more robust or to try and dispute it, perhaps, those kind of things. And so I find that way. And then the other thing that I think has been a real unlock recently that I wish I would have had early on in my PhD career is anytime I'm learning new equipment, I'm running these things as kind of a co-pilot while I'm learning that new equipment, asking it questions about the equipment, either about the technique overall or the very specific instrument I'm using. Sometimes troubleshooting or sometimes just like standard procedure. Why is it telling me to do this? Why does it function this way? I'm getting these results. Why is that? What can I kind of expect?
I see. With in general, like I think one thing that's interesting, I think compared to like what I'm used to hearing, again, with engineers and technical folk who are coding with AI tools, is both Josh and I, like I especially, like I know I've learned to just like almost not blindly trust, but like I take a lot of what the AI outputs as like good enough to solve my use case. And typically what I do is if I'm coding, I will talk to it. I'll have it generate code. I'll throw that code in. If the result goes awry, then I'll have to revisit that stuff and then manually intervene. But it sounds like your process, probably as a scientist, is more of like, I know that if I let AI take these steps, it is prone to inaccuracy. So I'm going to do my own first pass first, or ask it to give me an approach rather than actually telling it to do the data science or give me the paper summary before I read.
Yeah, basically, I kind of would break it down in three phases. I ask it what it would do. I then have it do the thing it told me it would do, and then I manually review it to the best of my ability.
Uh-huh.
And I'm saying, and again, once the AI helps you set an expectation for what you should be seeing, then even if you don't have expansive experience with that thing before, you can become a critical reviewer if you're willing to do a little bit of investigation, right? So like, even if
Mhm.
I haven't run that analysis before, if I ask the AI to first explain the analysis, then perform the analysis, I can see if the performed analysis matches the expectations that the AI set. And while it's not a perfect check, it is kind of a second layer check that allows me to say, did this thing go, off the wall
Mhm.
or not? And then again, no matter what, and this is true of AI systems or not, I'm always verifying whatever conclusions I'm arriving at with other sources as well. Does this match expectations across the literature? Is there any refutable, any evidence refuting the hypothesis I might be drawing here? And so you're
Mhm.
always doing kind of second, third, fourth order, verification, if you will, on anything. But the thing that is most exciting is kind of what you described, right? It's playing a real world experiment I can go run. Let me then go run that real world experiment and then help me analyze the results with layers of depth that I wouldn't otherwise be able to analyze it
Mhm.
with.
What do you think has to happen for you to be comfortable removing the third and second order verification steps? Like, I think
It's a
at
good,
what point do you,
yeah,
yeah, like what
yeah.
point do you like take the rule like wheels? I'll just watch you do your thing and you're okay.
I think in short, never. And I think that just comes from my experience in science. It's like that's just not how science is done, right? There is a peer review
Mhm.
process, even if people are concluding it, right? There is kind of this show and tell aspect of it. So like even in a hypothetical where AI could plan experiment, execute experiment, and present data, I would
Mhm.
still like kind of an X-ray view into that process so that I could supervise. Even if I was coming back after the fact to that data, I would still have follow-up questions and I would still be verifying the results it found and kind of stating whether they were corroborated across the existing body of knowledge or not. That's kind of what a scientist does, right? Like here's this new
Mhm.
observation I found. This either supports or refutes my initial hypothesis. Also, this is, in agreement or counter to what is known across the body of literature. You don't
Mhm.
necessarily, science is not necessarily meant to be written as a final conclusion. It's more or less meant to be an observation of
Mhm.
facts, and then some of those observations get contextualized into some sort of narrative story, which is I think great. But again, I would just use AI as an enabler throughout that
Mhm.
process. I do think we're going to see AI planning, running, and analyzing experiments, but I don't know that we'll ever see a day in which we are just simply saying we believe you, and then
Yeah.
going on.